Millionaire meets woman at park, then discovers she's his son's teacher. The sun cast a golden hue across the park, its rays filtering through the leafy trees, dappling the cobblestone paths with shifting patterns of light. Children's laughter rang out from the nearby playground, mingling with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. William sat on a wooden bench, his expensive navy blue suit and polished leather shoes looking out of place in the casual, carefree environment. His tie was slightly loosened, his shoulders slumped just enough to betray the weariness he felt. In his hand was a coffee cup, now lukewarm, barely touched. His gaze was distant, fixed on the children playing tag, their shouts of delight piercing the serenity of the afternoon. He couldn't help but think of Ethan, his teenage son, who used to run around just like that not so long ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since those days, though it couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years. Ethan had been full of life back then, always drawing, always curious. Now, he barely spoke to him. William sighed deeply, running a hand through his neatly combed hair, his thoughts heavy. The park had always been a place of solace for him, a rare retreat from the relentless demands of his business empire. Today, though, the peaceful surroundings only heightened the unease simmering beneath the surface. He felt like a stranger in his own life, his success rendered hollow by the growing distance between him and Ethan. A sudden movement in his peripheral vision snapped him out of his thoughts. A woman was walking toward him, juggling a tote bag and a handful of papers that threatened to escape her grasp with every step. Her light blue summer dress fluttered in the breeze, and her blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight. She didn't seem to notice William at first, her attention focused on keeping her precarious pile of belongings from spilling onto the ground. As she passed by his bench, a gust of wind did what she'd been trying to prevent. A cascade of papers went flying in every direction, swirling around her like startled birds. "Oh no!" she exclaimed, dropping her bag and scrambling to gather the pages. Without thinking, William rose from his bench and stepped in to help. He caught one of the wayward sheets as it fluttered past him and handed it to her. "Here, let me help you," he said, his voice calm and steady. She looked up, startled, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Hers were a soft gray, filled with a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. "Thank you," she said, flashing a quick smile before crouching to grab another paper from the grass. Together, they managed to retrieve most of the scattered sheets. William straightened up and handed her the last one, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Got it all?" he asked. She glanced at the pile in her hands, then at the few remaining pages on the ground. "I think so. Well, mostly. I hope none of it ended up in the fountain," she added with a rueful chuckle, nodding toward the nearby water feature. William followed her gaze and shook his head. "Doesn't look like it. You're safe." She laughed softly, the sound light and warm. "Thank goodness. These are lesson plans. Losing them would be a disaster." "You're a teacher?" William asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," she replied, tucking the papers back into her tote bag. Clara Thompson. I teach middle school English. It's my first year at a new school, so I'm still figuring things out." "William Carter," he said, offering his hand. "Nice to meet you." Clara took his hand and shook it firmly. "Likewise. And thank you again for your help. You saved me from looking completely unprofessional." William chuckled. "I doubt anyone would judge you too harshly for a gust of wind. But you're welcome." For a moment, there was silence between them, filled only by the sounds of the park, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, and the laughter of children. Clara glanced at the bench where William had been sitting. "Mind if I join you for a moment?" she asked. "Not at all," William replied, gesturing for her to sit. Clara sank onto the bench with a sigh, setting her bag beside her. "It's been a long day," she admitted, leaning back and looking up at the canopy of leaves above them. "Sometimes I think the kids have more energy than I do." William smiled faintly. "They probably do. It seems to be a universal truth. Do you have kids?" Clara asked, turning to look at him. "I do," he said, his voice softening. "A son. Ethan. He's 14. Clara nodded, a hint of admiration in her expression. "That's a fun age. Challenging but fun." "Challenging is a good word for it," William said, his smile fading slightly. We don't see eye to eye on much these days. Clara tilted her head, studying him for a moment. Teenagers can be tricky. They're trying to figure out who they are, and sometimes that means pushing away the people they love the most. William nodded, her words striking a chord. I suppose you're right. It's just hard to know how to reach him. He's so different from when he was little. Have you tried talking to him about what he's passionate about? Claire asked. Sometimes, kids just need someone to take an interest in what excites them. William frowned slightly. He's into art. He's always drawing. I've tried to encourage him, but I guess I don't really understand it. Clara smiled. You don't have to understand it. You just have to show that you care. That can make all the difference. Her words hung in the air, sinking into William's thoughts. Before he could respond, Clara glanced at her watch and stood up. I should get going. My students are probably wondering where their homework went, she said with a grin. William stood as well. It was nice meeting you, Clara. You too, William, she replied. And good luck with Ethan. He's lucky to have a dad who cares. As she walked away, William watched her go, her words echoing in his mind. For the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to reach his son after all. William remained seated on the bench for a while longer, Clara's words replaying in his mind. The park around him seemed quieter now, the hum of life in the background a distant echo to his thoughts. You just have to show that you care. It sounded simple when she said it, but as a father who felt more and more like a stranger in his son's life, the idea felt daunting. He thought about Ethan's art, sketchbooks scattered across his room, pages filled with intricate designs and characters that William had only ever glanced at. To Ethan, those sketches were a world of his own, a place where he could express what he couldn't say aloud. But to William, they'd always seemed like a distraction, something secondary to the more practical pursuits he envisioned for his son. That night, back in his large but empty house, William passed by Ethan's closed bedroom door. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. From inside, he could hear faint music, the kind of alternative rock Ethan had recently taken a liking to. For a moment, William thought about knocking, about asking to see Ethan's latest drawings. But the thought of being brushed off, or worse, ignored entirely, stopped him. Instead, he lowered his hand and continued down the hallway to his study. The next day, as William sifted through papers in his sleek office overlooking the city, he found himself distracted. The conversation with Clara still lingered, nagging at him like a pebble in his shoe. His assistant knocked softly on the door before stepping inside, breaking his train of thought. Mr. Carter, your lunch appointment is confirmed for 1 o'clock, she said, placing a folder on his desk. Thank you, Grace, he replied, barely glancing up. She hesitated, her usual professionalism wavering. Is everything all right, sir? William looked up, surprised by the question. Grace had worked for him for nearly 5 years, and she rarely ventured beyond the realm of business. What makes you ask that? You just seemed preoccupied, she said carefully. If there's anything I can do. No, I'm fine, he interrupted gently. But thank you. As she left, William leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline. The view was a reminder of everything he had built. His company, his wealth, his reputation. And yet, none of it seemed to matter when he thought about the growing chasm between him and Ethan. A week later, William found himself back in the park, the crisp morning air invigorating despite the weight on his mind. He hadn't expected to see Clara again, but there she was, sitting cross-legged on the grass, surrounded by a group of children. She was animated, gesturing as she spoke, her voice carrying hints of warmth and authority. William lingered at a distance, unsure why he felt compelled to watch. One of the children, a boy of about 10, held up a piece of paper, beaming as Clara praised his work. Her words were encouraging but precise, pointing out the strengths of his drawing while gently suggesting areas for improvement. The boy's smile widened as he nodded eagerly, clearly soaking up her advice. William couldn't help but admire the ease with which she connected with the children. He wondered if Ethan had a teacher like that, someone who saw his potential even when he didn't see it himself. The thought made him feel an uncomfortable mix of gratitude and guilt. As the children dispersed, Clara looked up and spotted William. She smiled and waved, walking over with a relaxed confidence. "Back again?" she asked. "Seems that way," he said, returning her smile. "You look busy." "Just a little art workshop I run on weekends," she explained, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Keeps me grounded." William raised an eyebrow. "Teaching all week isn't enough for you?" She laughed. "Teaching is my job. This is my passion. There's a difference." He nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "I think I understand what you mean." Clara studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "How's Ethan?" The question caught him off guard. "He's fine, I suppose. Still keeps to himself a lot." "Have you talked to him about his art yet?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing. "Not really," William admitted. "I don't even know where to start." "Start small," Clara suggested. "Ask him about his favorite piece. Or better yet, ask him to show you how he does it. Let him teach you for a change." William frowned, the idea both intriguing and unsettling. "I'm not sure he'd want to." "You'd be surprised," Clara said with a knowing smile. "Kids want their parents to care even when they act like they don't." That evening, William made a decision. After dinner, he approached Ethan's room again, this time determined not to retreat. He knocked lightly, and after a long pause, Ethan's voice called out, "Yeah?" "It's me," William said. "Can I come in?" There was another pause, longer this time, before Ethan muttered, "Sure." William opened the door and stepped inside, his eyes immediately drawn to the sketches scattered across the desk. Ethan was seated in his gaming chair, his headphones around his neck, looking both curious and wary. "What's up?" Ethan asked, his tone neutral. "I was just wondering if you'd show me some of your drawings," William said, trying to sound casual. Ethan blinked, clearly caught off guard. Sure, I guess." He reached for a sketchbook and flipped it open, holding it out for William to see. The pages were filled with intricate designs, characters, landscapes, even fantastical creatures. William was struck by the detail and creativity in each piece. "These are incredible," he said honestly, flipping through the pages. "You've got real talent?" Ethan shrugged, but there was a flicker of pride in his expression. "Thanks. What inspired this one?" William asked, pointing to a drawing of a dragon perched on a cliff. Ethan's eyes lit up as he began to explain, his words tumbling out in an eager stream. For the first time in months, William felt like he was really connecting with his son. He listened intently, asking questions and offering encouragement, and as the conversation flowed, the distance between them seemed to shrink. As Ethan explained the details of his artwork, William felt a sense of pride swell within him. It wasn't just the talent Ethan displayed but the passion with which he spoke. His son's voice carried an energy William hadn't heard in years, and it struck him how much he had missed this side of Ethan. "So, do you ever think about what you want to do with this?" William asked carefully, not wanting to dampen the moment. "Like, make it into a career?" Ethan hesitated, his excitement dimming slightly. "I don't know. Maybe. But it's not like that's realistic, right? It's just drawing." "Who says it's not realistic?" William pressed, keeping his tone light. "People make careers out of their art all the time. You could be one of them." Ethan looked at him, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "You've never really cared about this stuff before? Why do you care now?" The question hit harder than William expected, but he didn't flinch. He knew he owed Ethan an honest answer. "Because I've been wrong," he admitted. "I've spent so much time focusing on other things, work, expectations, that I didn't take the time to really see what's important to you. And I want to change that." Ethan didn't respond right away. His gaze shifted to his sketchbook, his fingers tracing the edge of the cover. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. I don't want to get my hopes up, you know? What if I'm not good enough?" "You are good enough," William said firmly. "And if this is what you love, I'll do whatever I can to support you." Ethan glanced up at him, the guarded expression on his face softening ever so slightly. "Thanks, Dad." It was only 2 words, but to William, they felt monumental. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt like he'd reached his son. And while it was only a small step, it gave him hope that they could rebuild what had been lost. The next day, William found himself browsing an art supply store during his lunch break. The bright aisles were filled with paints, brushes, sketch pads, and supplies he didn't know the first thing about. A helpful associate approached him as he stood staring at a display of professional-grade markers. "Looking for something specific?" she asked with a smile. "Honestly, I have no idea," William admitted. "My son is into drawing and I want to get him something meaningful. But I'm completely out of my depth here." The associate nodded, her smile widening. "That's great that you're supporting him. Does he like to sketch, paint, or something else?" "Mostly sketching, I think," William replied, thinking of Ethan's intricate designs. She led him to another aisle and pointed out a set of high-quality sketching pencils and markers. "These are a good place to start. They're professional grade but not overwhelming for someone still exploring their style." William nodded, picking up the set. "I'll take these." "Thank you." As he left the store, bag in hand, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. For the first time, he was taking an active role in Ethan's world, and it felt good. That evening, William handed Ethan the bag after dinner. Ethan raised an eyebrow as he peeked inside, pulling out the set of art supplies. "What's this for?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "I thought you could use something a little more professional," William said, his voice casual. "I figured if you're going to be creating masterpieces, you should have the right tools." Ethan stared at the supplies for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to William's surprise, he smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "Thanks, Dad. This is really cool." "You're welcome," William replied, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through him. "I'm looking forward to seeing what you create." Ethan nodded, his excitement already returning as he examined the markers and pencils. For the first time in months, the tension between them seemed to ease, replaced by a tentative connection. The weeks that followed saw a gradual but noticeable shift in their relationship. William made an effort to ask Ethan about his drawings, and Ethan, in turn, became more open about sharing them. They spent time together in ways they hadn't in years, whether it was discussing art techniques or simply sitting in the same room, William working on his laptop while Ethan sketched nearby. One evening, William brought up the idea of visiting an art gallery together. "I saw an ad for this exhibit downtown," he said over dinner. "It's all about contemporary illustration. Thought it might be something you'd like?" Ethan looked up from his plate, surprised. "You want to go to an art exhibit?" "Sure," William said, smiling. "I could use a little culture. And who better to guide me than my own expert?" Ethan grinned, his eyes lighting up. "But that sounds cool." The gallery visit turned out to be more impactful than William anticipated. Walking through the brightly lit halls, he watched as Ethan studied the artwork with an intensity that reminded him of a seasoned professional. Ethan pointed out details William would have overlooked, explaining techniques and themes with a confidence that made William proud. At one particular piece, a large, intricate mural of a cityscape, Ethan paused for a long time. William joined him, taking in the swirling colors and detailed figures. "What do you think?" William asked. "It's amazing," Ethan said softly. "The way they blend realism with imagination, it's like a whole world in one image." William nodded, his gaze shifting to Ethan. "You could do something like this one day?" Ethan looked at him, a mixture of hope and disbelief in his eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so," William said. "And when you do, I'll be your biggest fan." The connection between them continued to grow, and with it, William's understanding of his son's world. He even reached out to Ethan's school, arranging a meeting with his teachers to discuss how best to support him. When he walked into the meeting room, however, he was stunned to see a familiar face, Clara. "William," Clara said, her expression shifting from surprise to delight. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for Ethan," William replied, still processing the coincidence. "You're his teacher?" Clara smiled. "Yes, I am. I had no idea he was your son." William shook his head in amazement, a small smile creeping onto his face. "What are the odds?" he said, still trying to wrap his head around the connection. Clara chuckled softly, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please sit. I think this just got a lot more interesting." William took a seat, his curiosity piqued. How's Ethan doing? I mean, really doing? Clara leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the desk. Ethan is incredibly talented. His art is exceptional and his creativity is off the charts. But he's reserved. He doesn't participate much in class discussions, and I think he's carrying a lot on his shoulders. William frowned, his stomach twisting. Do you think he's struggling? Not academically, Clara reassured him. But emotionally? Possibly. He's a deep thinker, and sometimes kids like that need extra encouragement to express themselves. I've seen glimpses of it in his art. There's a lot he wants to say but might not know how. William nodded slowly, guilt creeping in as he thought about how much he'd missed. I've been trying to connect with him more, he admitted. It's been a challenge. Clara smiled warmly. The fact that you're trying means more than you think. Kids notice those efforts, even if they don't always say it. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed Ethan, his strengths, his potential, and ways to help him thrive. Clara's insights were thoughtful and practical, but more than that, they came from a genuine care for Ethan's well-being. William found himself both impressed and grateful. As the meeting wrapped up, Clara handed William a folder with some of Ethan's recent artwork from class. Take a look at these when you have time, she said. There's some of his best work. William accepted the folder, his chest tightening as he glanced at the colorful pages inside. Thank you, Clara. For everything. Clara stood, her expression kind. It's my job, but it's also a privilege. Ethan's a remarkable kid. As William left the school, the folder clutched in his hand, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Clara's words had reinforced what he already knew. He had to do more, not just to support Ethan's art but to truly be there for him. That evening, William sat in his study, the folder of Ethan's artwork spread out on the desk before him. Each piece was a window into his son's mind, a blend of vivid imagination and raw emotion. One drawing, in particular, caught his attention. It depicted a lone figure standing on a cliff, staring out at a stormy sea. The detail was stunning, but it was the emotion behind it that struck William. It spoke of isolation, of longing, and of strength in the face of adversity. He ran his fingers over the page, a lump forming in his throat. How had he not seen this before? How had he missed the depth of his son's world? The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression cautious. Hey, he said. What's that? William gestured to the desk. Your teacher gave me these. Said they were some of your best work. Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the drawings. She said that? She did, William said. And she's right. This one, he held up the drawing of the cliff. This is incredible. What were you thinking about when you made it? Ethan hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Just stuff. William smiled gently. I think there's a lot more to it than that. You've got a way of showing things people don't always say out loud. That's a gift. Ethan looked at him, his expression softening. Thanks, Dad. I mean it, William said. And I want to help you take it further. If this is what you love, I want to make sure you have every opportunity to follow it. Ethan blinked, clearly surprised. You really mean that? I do, William said firmly. But more importantly, I want to be there for you. Not just for your art but for everything. Ethan nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. That means a lot. The next weekend, William surprised Ethan with tickets to an art workshop being held downtown. It was a small, hands-on session led by a renowned illustrator, and William had gone out of his way to secure spots for both of them. As they entered the studio, Ethan's eyes widened, taking in the rows of easels, paints, and brushes. The walls were lined with framed artwork, each piece more inspiring than the last. This is amazing, Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. I thought you'd like it, William replied, feeling a swell of pride at his son's excitement. Throughout the session, they worked side by side, following the instructor's guidance. William struggled to keep up, his lines shaky and his colors mismatched, but Ethan thrived. His strokes were confident, his designs bursting with creativity. Watching him, William couldn't help but smile. For the first time, he felt like he was truly part of Ethan's world. At the end of the workshop, the instructor approached them, her eyes lighting up as she examined Ethan's work. "This is fantastic," she said. "You've got real talent. Have you thought about entering competitions or showcasing your work?" Ethan glanced at William, uncertainty flickering across his face. "I don't know. You should," the instructor said. "You've got something special." As they left the studio, William placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "She's right, you know. You should think about it." Ethan nodded, his confidence growing with every step. "Maybe I will." Over the following months, Ethan's art became a central part of their lives. William helped him set up a small studio in the house, complete with better supplies and space to create. They attended more workshops together, and Ethan even submitted a piece to a local art contest, earning an honorable mention. Their relationship blossomed, the walls that had once separated them crumbling with each shared moment. And through it all, William felt a deeper connection not only to Ethan but to himself. Supporting his son's dreams had given his own life a renewed sense of purpose. One chilly autumn afternoon, Ethan burst into William's study, holding an envelope in his hand. His face was flushed with excitement, his breath coming in quick bursts. "Dad, guess what?" Ethan exclaimed, waving the envelope. William looked up from his desk, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" Ethan handed him the envelope, practically bouncing on his feet. "It's from the state art competition. Remember the piece I submitted last month?" William opened the envelope carefully, his own excitement building. Inside was a formal letter with bold text at the top. "Congratulations. You've won first place." William's eyes widened, and he looked up at Ethan. "You did it." Ethan grinned, his expression a mix of pride and disbelief. "I can't believe it. They're going to showcase my work at the gallery downtown." "That's incredible," William said, pulling Ethan into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." Ethan pulled back, his grin fading slightly. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You've been there for me, and that means everything." William felt a lump in his throat, his son's words striking him deeply. "You did this, Ethan. All I did was help you see what you were capable of. And I'll keep doing that for as long as you'll let me." The gallery event was a grand affair. William and Ethan arrived early, both dressed in sharp suits that made them look more alike than either of them realized. The space was filled with vibrant artwork, but Ethan's piece, a stunning, dreamlike depiction of a city illuminated by stars, took center stage. Clara was there too, having been invited by Ethan. She stood near the artwork, beaming with pride. When she saw William and Ethan, she waved them over. "This is amazing, Ethan," Clara said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "You've worked so hard for this, and it shows." "Thanks, Miss Thompson," Ethan said, his cheeks flushing. "I couldn't have done it without your support." "And your dad's," Clara added, glancing at William with a warm smile. "You've got a great team behind you." William nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "He's the one who inspires us." As the evening progressed, more attendees stopped by to admire Ethan's work. A few even asked him questions about his process, treating him like a professional artist. William watched from a distance, his chest swelling with pride. This was Ethan's moment, and he was thriving. Toward the end of the night, Clara approached William. "You must be proud," she said, her voice soft. "More than I can put into words," William admitted, his eyes still on Ethan. "I feel like I'm finally seeing who he really is." Clara smiled knowingly. "He's always been there. He just needed you to notice." William turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "You've been a big part of that. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Clara said with a shrug. "Watching him succeed is thanks enough." There was a moment of silence between them, the kind that felt heavy with unspoken words. William broke it first. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? I'd love to hear more about how you've managed to inspire not just Ethan, but probably dozens of other kids too." Clara tilted her head, a playful smile forming on her lips. "I'd like that." As the weeks turned into months, William and Ethan's bond only grew stronger. They spent more time together, not just focusing on art but sharing other parts of their lives. William made it a point to be present, to attend Ethan's events, to listen, and to encourage him in ways he hadn't before. Meanwhile, his conversations with Clara became more frequent, evolving from casual chats to meaningful discussions about life, family, and the challenges they'd both faced. There was an undeniable connection between them, one that neither rushed but both welcomed. One Saturday morning, William and Ethan were sitting at the breakfast table, the sunlight streaming through the windows. Ethan was sketching idly in his notebook, while William sipped his coffee, reading the newspaper. "I've been thinking," Ethan said suddenly, looking up from his sketchbook. "About what?" William asked, setting down his coffee. "I want to apply to that summer art program Clara told me about," Ethan said. "The one at the university downtown. It's intense, but I think I'm ready." William smiled, his pride evident. "That sounds like a great idea. Let's do whatever it takes to make it happen." Ethan nodded, his determination clear. "Thanks, Dad. For everything." "No, Ethan," William said, his voice steady. "Thank you. You've taught me more than you'll ever know." Later that day, William found himself back at the park where he'd first met Clara. The memory of that day felt distant yet pivotal. He spotted her sitting on the same bench, reading a book. He approached, his steps confident but unhurried. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Clara looked up, her face lighting up with a smile. "Not at all." As he sat down, the two of them fell into easy conversation, the kind that felt as natural as the breeze rustling through the trees. They talked about Ethan, about Clara's students, and about life's unexpected turns. "You know," Clara said after a pause, "meeting you and Ethan has reminded me why I love teaching so much. It's not just about lessons. It's about connections." William nodded. "And you've reminded me that it's never too late to start over. To be better." Their eyes met, and in that moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. The future was uncertain, but it held promise, and that was enough. In the following weeks, Ethan threw himself into preparing his application for the summer art program. The house was filled with an energy William hadn't felt in years: late-night brainstorming sessions, bursts of inspiration, and the occasional frustrated groan from Ethan as he refined his portfolio. William made it a point to be there through it all, offering encouragement, running out for supplies when needed, and learning more about his son's creative process. One evening, as Ethan spread his artwork across the dining room table, William joined him with a cup of tea. "Looks like you're putting together quite the collection," he said, gesturing to the vibrant mix of pieces. "I hope it's enough," Ethan said, his voice tinged with doubt. "The program's super competitive." William leaned closer, studying the pieces. "This one," he said, pointing to a drawing of a bustling cityscape at sunset. "It's my favorite. It's alive." Ethan smiled faintly. "Thanks. I tried to capture how it feels to be in the middle of everything but still kind of apart from it." "That's powerful," William said. "It's going to stand out." Ethan glanced at him, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "You really think so?" "I know so," William said, his tone firm. "And even if they don't see it, that doesn't mean it isn't true. What you're creating is incredible, Ethan. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, make you doubt that." Ethan's smile widened, and for a moment, the quiet tension that used to fill their home felt like a distant memory. The day of Ethan's interview for the program arrived, and the nerves in the house were palpable. William insisted on driving him to the university, and though Ethan tried to act nonchalant, his bouncing knee gave away his anxiety. "You're going to do great," William said as they pulled into the parking lot. "Just be yourself and let them see what you've shown me." Ethan nodded, gripping his portfolio tightly. "Thanks, Dad." As Ethan disappeared into the building, William stayed behind, waiting in the car. He couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in the past few months. The boy who used to shut him out was now sharing his dreams, and William was learning how to support him in ways he hadn't before. It was a second chance he hadn't expected, and he wasn't going to waste it. When Ethan finally returned, his face was a mixture of relief and excitement. "I think it went well," he said as he climbed into the car. "They seemed really interested." "I knew they would be," William said, starting the engine. "Let's celebrate." "Ice cream's on me." Ethan grinned. "Deal." 2 weeks later, an envelope from the program arrived in the mail. Ethan paced the living room as William watched from the couch, the unopened letter clutched in his hand. "Are you going to open it, or should I do it for you? William teased gently. Ethan stopped pacing, took a deep breath, and tore open the envelope. His eyes scanned the letter, and when he looked up, his face was alight with joy. I got in. William jumped to his feet, pulling Ethan into a hug. I knew you would. Congratulations, Ethan. You earned this. Thanks, Dad, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't have done it without you. As summer approached, Ethan's excitement grew with each passing day. William helped him prepare for the program, from buying supplies to planning his schedule. Clara, ever the supportive teacher, even offered tips on how to make the most of the experience. The night before the program began, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, going over his materials one last time. William joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You ready for this? I think so, Ethan said, glancing up. I'm nervous, but I'm excited too. That's a good combination, William said with a smile. It means you care. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. Thanks for believing in me, Dad. It means a lot. William squeezed his shoulder. I'll always believe in you, Ethan. No matter what. The summer art program turned out to be a transformative experience for Ethan. He thrived in the creative environment, surrounded by peers who shared his passion. William attended every showcase and event, marveling at his son's growth and talent. He wasn't just a spectator, he was an active part of Ethan's journey, and that made all the difference. At the final showcase, William sat in the audience with Clara, who had come to support Ethan as well. The room was filled with proud parents and beaming students, but William's focus was entirely on his son, who stood at the front of the room, presenting his latest work. This is incredible, Clara whispered, leaning toward William. He's come so far. He has, William agreed, his voice filled with pride. And I feel like I have too. Clara smiled, her hand briefly brushing against his. You've both grown. It's been inspiring to watch. As Ethan wrapped up his presentation, the audience erupted into applause. William's chest swelled with pride as he stood, clapping louder than anyone else. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Ethan continued to pursue his art with renewed confidence, and William found joy in being part of his journey. His relationship with Clara deepened as well, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. One sunny afternoon, the three of them found themselves back in the park where it had all begun. Ethan was sketching on a bench, his pencil moving effortlessly across the page, while William and Clara sat nearby, sipping coffee. You know, Clara said, glancing at Ethan, I think he's going to do amazing things. William nodded, his gaze soft. He already has. As they sat there, the golden sunlight casting a warm glow over the park, William felt a deep sense of peace. Life had taken an unexpected turn, but it had led him to something far more meaningful than he could have imagined. Connection, love, and the realization that it's never too late to start again. As summer faded into fall, Ethan's confidence grew. His work at the art program had not only honed his skills but also connected him with a network of like-minded peers and mentors. His sketchbooks were now filled with projects that brimmed with ambition, and his conversations with William became more animated, filled with ideas and plans for the future. One evening, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table with Clara, who had stopped by to help him brainstorm for an upcoming art competition. William stood at the counter, watching them with a quiet smile. Clara leaned over a sketch Ethan had been working on, her expression thoughtful. This one, Clara said, tapping the page, has something special. The way you've captured the light here, it's like it's alive. Ethan grinned, his cheeks flushing slightly. Thanks. I wasn't sure if it was working. It's more than working, Clara replied. It's telling a story. That's what makes great art. William walked over, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. She's right. You've got something here, Ethan. You should go for it. Ethan looked between the two of them, his grin widening. Okay, I will. As Ethan prepared for the competition, William and Clara continued to support him in every way they could. Clara's insights as a teacher proved invaluable, while William made sure Ethan had everything he needed, from supplies to moral support. The house buzzed with energy as Ethan worked late into the night, refining his piece. One evening, as Ethan was adding the final touches to his work, He paused and looked up at William and Clara, who were sitting nearby. "I just want to say thanks," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "To both of you. For believing in me." William exchanged a glance with Clara, his chest tightening with pride. "We're just proud of you, Ethan," he said. "And we'll always be here for you." Clara nodded, her smile warm. "You've done all the hard work, Ethan. We're just lucky to be part of the journey." The day of the competition arrived, and Ethan's nerves were palpable as they walked into the gallery. The space was filled with artwork from talented young artists, each piece more stunning than the last. Ethan's submission, a breathtaking piece that blended fantasy and realism, was displayed prominently, drawing admiring looks from the crowd. William stood by Ethan's side, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. "No matter what happens, I want you to know how proud I am of you," he said quietly. Ethan looked up at him, his expression soft. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." As the judges moved through the gallery, evaluating each piece, William and Clara exchanged nervous glances. They knew how much this moment meant to Ethan, and they could feel the weight of his anticipation. Finally, the announcement came. The head judge stood at the front of the room, holding an envelope. "The winner of this year's Young Artists competition is Ethan Carter." The room erupted into applause, and Ethan's eyes widened in shock before a huge grin spread across his face. William pulled him into a hug, his voice filled with emotion. "You did it, Ethan. I knew you could." Clara clapped enthusiastically, her eyes shining with pride. "Congratulations, Ethan. You deserve this." Ethan stepped forward to accept his award, his hands trembling slightly as he held the certificate. As he stood in front of the crowd, he took a deep breath and spoke. "I just want to thank my dad and Miss Thompson," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions brimming beneath the surface. "They've supported me every step of the way, and I wouldn't be here without them." William felt a lump rise in his throat as he listened to his son's heartfelt words. This moment was everything he had hoped for, and more. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's achievement opened new doors for him. He was invited to participate in exhibitions, connect with professional artists, and even contribute illustrations to a local magazine. His confidence soared, and his dreams of becoming a full-time artist began to feel more tangible than ever. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to William. "I've been thinking about college," he said. "I want to apply to an art school." William smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "That sounds like a great plan. Whatever you decide, I'll be right there with you." Ethan nodded, a look of determination on his face. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." Meanwhile, William and Clara's relationship continued to deepen. Their shared commitment to supporting Ethan had brought them closer, but their connection extended beyond that. They found joy in each other's company, whether it was sharing quiet conversations in the park or laughing over coffee on lazy Sunday mornings. One afternoon, as they walked through the park where they'd first met, William paused and turned to Clara. "You know, I never expected any of this," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Meeting you, reconnecting with Ethan, it's changed everything." Clara smiled, her eyes warm. "Life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it?" "It does," William agreed. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "And I'm grateful for every moment of it." As they continued walking, the future felt full of promise. It wasn't perfect, there would always be challenges to face, but together, they had built something that felt solid and meaningful. And that was enough. As the months passed, Ethan threw himself into preparing his applications for art schools. His days were filled with sketching, revising, and compiling a portfolio that reflected his unique style and talent. William supported him in every way he could, from proofreading essays to helping him research schools with strong art programs. Ethan's dream was becoming more tangible with each passing day, and the house buzzed with an energy that William hadn't felt in years. One evening, as they sat in the living room going over Ethan's application checklist, William leaned back and looked at his son. "You know," he said, "I've never seen you this focused before. It's inspiring." Ethan smirked, looking down at his sketches. "Well, you're the one who told me I should go all in. Guess I listened?" William chuckled. "It's nice to know you listen sometimes." Ethan laughed too, the sound light and easy. For a moment, the two of them simply enjoyed the comfort of their new bond. A bond that had taken months to rebuild but now felt stronger than ever. Meanwhile, William and Clara's relationship continued to grow. They started seeing each other more often outside of school events, sharing meals, conversations, and quiet moments that brought them closer together. It wasn't just the shared care for Ethan that connected them, it was their understanding of each other's struggles and their shared appreciation for life's second chances. One evening after dinner at a cozy bistro downtown, they walked hand in hand through the city streets. The lights of the buildings glowed warmly against the night sky, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. "You've been spending a lot of time at the school lately," Clara said with a teasing smile. "Are you sure it's just for Ethan?" William smirked. "Well, it started that way. But there might be another reason." "Oh?" Clara raised an eyebrow, her tone playful. "And what reason might that be?" William stopped walking and turned to her, his expression soft but earnest. "You've made such a difference, not just for Ethan but for me too. I don't think I ever said how much I appreciate everything you've done." Clara's teasing smile softened into something more tender. "You've done a lot too, William. You've changed so much, and it's been incredible to see." They stood there for a moment, the bustling city around them fading into the background. William took a step closer, his voice quieter now. "I don't know where this is going, but I do know I want you to be a part of my life." "And Ethan's?" Clara's eyes glistened, and she nodded. "I'd like that." The holidays approached, and with them came a sense of warmth and togetherness that had been absent from William and Ethan's lives for far too long. Clara joined them for Thanksgiving, bringing her signature apple pie and her cheerful energy. For the first time in years, their house felt alive with laughter and conversation. After dinner, as they sat by the fireplace, Ethan showed Clara some of his newest sketches. She admired his work with the same genuine enthusiasm she'd always shown, and Ethan soaked up her praise with a confidence that made William's heart swell. "You know," Clara said, holding up one of the sketches, "this would make an amazing holiday card. Have you ever thought about selling your work?" Ethan blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Selling it? I don't know. Would people even want to buy it?" "Of course they would," Clara said firmly. "You have a unique voice, Ethan. People connect with that?" William nodded. "She's right. We could help you set up an online shop or something. It could be a fun project." Ethan looked between them, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "But let's do it." Over the next few weeks, Ethan worked tirelessly to turn some of his favorite pieces into digital designs for holiday cards and prints. Clara helped him set up a simple online store, while William handled the logistics of printing and shipping. The project brought them even closer together, and the response from friends, family, and even strangers was overwhelmingly positive. "This is amazing," Ethan said one evening as he tallied up the sales. "I never thought people would actually want to buy my art." William smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "It's just the beginning, Ethan. You've got something special and people are starting to see that." Ethan grinned, his confidence growing with each passing day. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done this without you." As winter deepened, so did the bond between William, Ethan, and Clara. They spent weekends together, exploring art galleries, trying new recipes, and even decorating the house for the holidays. It was a season of warmth and renewal, a stark contrast to the loneliness and distance they had known in the past. On Christmas morning, as they exchanged gifts by the tree, Ethan handed William a carefully wrapped package. "This is for you," he said, his voice hesitant but hopeful. William opened it to reveal a framed drawing of the two of them sitting on a park bench, the same bench where William had first met Clara. The details were stunning, the golden light, the trees swaying in the breeze, the warmth between father and son. "I wanted to thank you," Ethan said, his voice quiet, "for everything you've done. For believing in me." William stared at the drawing, his throat tight with emotion. "Ethan, this is incredible. Thank you. It means so much." Clara smiled from her spot by the fireplace, her eyes misty. "It's beautiful. A perfect reminder of how far you've both come." William nodded, his heart full. "It really is,"